All right, let's dive in. We're taking a closer look at Priscilla Johnson McMillan this time, a journalist who kind of stumbled into the whole JFK assassination whirlwind.
Yeah, she's a fascinating character in this whole thing.
You bet. We've got this stack of articles, all from the third decade.
Focusing on, of course.
JFK assassination research, the whole 9 yards.
Right.
But there's this one piece. It really digs deep into Priscilla's connection with Lee Harvey Oswald.
Yeah, and that's the really wild part. I mean, she interviewed Oswald in Moscow.
Back in '59.
Way before the assassination. He was just some young guy trying to defect to the Soviet Union.
So we're basically getting a sneak peek into Oswald's life before, well, you know.
Before he became, well, Lee Harvey Oswald.
Exactly. Okay, so let's rewind to that first encounter, 1959.
All right.
So Priscilla, she's working as a journalist, right,
Yeah.
for the North American Newspaper Alliance.
Right.
And somehow she manages to snag an interview with Oswald.
At his hotel in Moscow.
Talk about a scoop. And in her original article, the one that never actually ran, she describes him as, get this, Joe College type.
Joe College.
Yep. Even mentions a slight southern drawl.
Huh. That's a far cry from the cold-blooded assassin image, isn't it?
A million miles away. But it's important, I think, to remember what was going on back then.
Totally. Cold War tensions, right.
At their peak, defecting to the Soviets, that was a huge deal.
Yeah, not just some personal choice.
It was a political statement.
Yeah.
Big consequences.
Absolutely. So for Priscilla to even get close to Oswald at that time,
It speaks volumes.
about her connections, her guts as a journalist.
No doubt. Now, here's the other strange thing. Her article never saw the light of day back then.
1959?
Yep. She claimed Nana, her publisher, made an editorial decision.
Okay.
But then a memo pops up.
What did it say?
It showed she knew Oswald was about to skip town
Leaving the hotel.
for some electronics training, no less.
And she didn't include that in her report.
Left it out completely. Makes you wonder, was there something more to her Moscow trip than just reporting?
Interesting.
So, fast forward to after the assassination,
Okay.
Oswald's public enemy number one.
Yeah.
Suddenly, that interview from '59,
It's gold.
pure gold. Priscilla decides to revise the article, gets it published in the Boston Globe.
Oh, the Boston Globe. Wow.
Big time. But here's the catch, the tone, the wording, everything changes.
How so?
Remember Joe College?
Yeah.
Gone. Instead, we get this portrayal of Oswald as of the stuff from which fanatics are made.
Whoa.
Quite a shift. Almost like she's intentionally trying to darken his image now that, well, we all know what happened.
Right. And fanatic. That's a strong word.
Super strong.
Yeah.
And you know what? It doesn't appear anywhere in her original notes or any communication from back then. So was she influenced by the whole Oswald as assassin narrative? Consciously or not, you know?
It's possible. Like adapting her story to fit what everyone believed.
Makes you think. The height thing is another weird one. In her first account, she says Oswald was 6 feet tall.
6 feet. Okay.
But in the revised version, poof, no mention of height at all.
Interesting. And the official records, what do they say?
Plus, another reporter who interviewed Oswald in Moscow,
What'd they say?
5'9".
So where'd that 6-foot description even come from? Maybe she saw his passport.
You know, possibly through some connection at the American embassy.
Maybe.
These inconsistencies, they just keep piling up. Makes you question her initial account, for sure.
Yeah.
And hint at something more going on than just reporting the news.
Right.
Here's another twist. The FBI was already looking into Priscilla before the assassination.
They were.
Yep. Reports suggested she might be, get this, a target for KGB recruitment.
So the FBI thought she might be working with the Soviets.
That's what they suspected. Talk about adding fuel to the fire. It makes everything even more complicated.
Absolutely. If they were suspicious of her, what was she really doing in Moscow?
Were her ties to, let's say, official channels deeper than she let on?
Good questions. And to make it even more confusing, an FBI memo pops up calling her a former State Department employee.
Hold on.
Straight up contradicts her claims of being a freelance journalist.
Wow. So now we've got a tangled web of information.
It's hard to figure out where Priscilla fits into all this.
It really is.
Feels like we're putting a puzzle together, but some of the pieces are missing. Or maybe even, changed.
Yeah, we got to be careful not to jump to conclusions.
Of course.
But we can't just ignore these weird things either.
Right.
So how do we even start making sense of Priscilla and her changing stories about Oswald?
Well, one possibility is that initially she saw Oswald's story as, this disillusioned young guy.
Okay.
who made a bad choice.
Mm-hmm.
Her Joe College description, maybe that was her trying to, I don't know, understand him.
So she started with a more, like, sympathetic view.
Maybe, yeah. Seeing him as a lost soul, not a potential threat.
Okay, I get that. But then the assassination happens and suddenly everyone's calling Oswald a monster.
Yeah.
Maybe that pressure, the weight of history, changed her perspective.
It's possible. She might have felt like she needed to distance herself from that early, more sympathetic view.
Like unconsciously changing her story to fit what everyone else was saying.
Right.
But then there are those connections to the FBI and the State Department. That makes it hard to believe she was just an innocent bystander.
Oh, absolutely. Which brings us to another possibility, that Priscilla was more than just a journalist.
Like what? A spy?
Maybe working with intelligence agencies, using her press credentials as cover.
A secret agent? That would explain a lot, wouldn't it?
The secrecy, the access she had, maybe even why her story changed.
To fit the official narrative, you mean?
Possibly, yeah. If that's true, there might be evidence buried somewhere in classified files.
Or maybe it's been wiped clean.
Could be. We might never know for sure.
Feels like we're in a spy movie now. But we have to consider everything, right?
Definitely.
There's also the idea that maybe, just maybe, Priscilla was after something else entirely.
Like what?
Fame.
Yeah.
Notoriety.
Ah, I see.
She had this unique connection to one of history's most infamous figures.
That's true.
Imagine the headlines. The journalist who knew Oswald,
It's a tempting thought.
and then there's her relationship with Marina Oswald.
Lee Harvey's widow.
Yeah. Was she really trying to understand Marina's perspective?
Or was she using her?
For her own gain, tough to say. But the fact that her book, Marina and Lee, didn't come out until 1977
That's a long time after the assassination.
makes you wonder if she was waiting for the right moment to, maximize her impact.
Or maybe something was holding her back.
Government pressure.
Possibly. It's hard to say for sure.
With all these unanswered questions, it's almost impossible to figure out what Priscilla's role really was.
Yeah, she's a real enigma.
So where does that leave us? Was she a reliable source? An opportunist? A pawn in some bigger game?
I think it's safe to say her motivations were, well, complicated. A mix of personal ambition and, pressures from outside forces.
Maybe she didn't even fully understand her own role in all of this.
That's a good point.
It's like history is rarely black and white.
Right.
It's messy, confusing, and often driven by people whose actions are hard to explain, even decades later.
Absolutely. But that shouldn't stop us from trying to understand.
Yeah, it does feel like we're trying to, crack some historical code,
Yeah,
and someone keeps changing the cipher.
exactly. And like any good codebreaker, we have to use every tool at our disposal. In this case, we've got Priscilla's own words.
Oh, right, we've got her original article, the unpublished one, then the revised version after the assassination.
And let's not forget the State Department summary, and then all her later writings, her articles in that book.
It's like snapshots of how her thinking about Oswald changed over time.
And what's really striking is how her language shifts. Early on, it's more observational, even a bit hesitant. But after the assassination, it becomes much more, assertive.
Analytical, maybe, even judgmental.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Almost like she's trying to convince everyone, including herself, that she saw the warning signs back then.
Like that she could tell this Joe College kid had the potential for violence all along.
Exactly. But at the same time, you also sense this struggle, like she's wrestling with her own part in all this.
Was she too trusting? Did she miss something? Or was she being played by forces she didn't even realize existed?
We might never have a clear answer. But that's what makes this whole deep dive so fascinating, I think. It really makes you confront the messiness of history.
The way people's motives can be so hard to figure out.
And how even with all the information we have now, some things just stay shrouded in mystery.
So, after all this, how do we see Priscilla Johnson McMillan? Is she a trustworthy source? A government agent? An ambitious reporter who got caught up in the biggest story of the century? Or maybe all the above?
My guess is it's a bit of everything, which makes her such an intriguing figure. She really shows how complex the people who shape history can be. They're flawed, they've got their own agendas, they're driven by things we might never fully understand.
Well said. We may never know the full extent of Priscilla's involvement in the JFK assassination, but her story reminds us that history is rarely simple. It's a web of secrets, conflicting stories, and people whose true motives remain hidden. It's our job, as curious minds, to keep digging, to keep asking questions, and to keep trying to make sense of the past. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the life of Priscilla Johnson McMillan. It's been a real journey.